Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Papa Vane and this is Crusader Kings 3 and today we're going to take a long look at performance and AI. This is Gotta Go Fast, the 36th dev diary, and this was written by Maneth. Thank you very much, Maneth. It's always nice to see a look under the hood. Now before you leave and say I'm not interested in coding, I don't understand coding, I've seen the Matrix, or well, some of the Matrix and then some of Mr. Robot, let me tell you, and CSI Miami of course, don't forget about CSI Miami, but then let me tell you we're in the same boat, we're in the same club, and I'm going to break this dev diary down where we essentially skip most of the actual technical details because I can't explain them to you anyway. If you're interested in them, go into the forums, read the actual thread and then ask your questions. I know Maneth hangs around. Maneth, has answered a couple of questions here anyway in this thread, and I think that is very, very interesting on a technical level as well, but I'm definitely not the right person to explain it. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to focus on the player side implications of performance and AI, because of course you're going to notice whether performance is good, whether AI is good, stupid, optimal, suboptimal, annoying, frustrating. All of those things are things that you as a player will notice right away. Now before we do that, I want to announce two things. The first thing is that the Twitch Paradox Interactive channel will start streaming Crusader Kings 3 on every Wednesday 4 p.m. CEST, so that's their Twitch channel. Starting tomorrow, meaning tomorrow 4 p.m. CEST, that is the 5th of August, you will have the first unedited Crusader Kings 3 live stream. And on top of that, you can watch the video on demand of course on their Twitch, and you can go and watch an edited version at some later time on their YouTube channel. Now, speaking of their YouTube channel, if I'm currently pointing it to nothingness, but like somewhere over there, I'm hopefully gonna edit it and, cut it in. I made a video, I was sponsored by Paradox Interactive, and I made a video about characters and the details and the very core concepts of characters and what it means in Crusader Kings 3, and I'm very happy about that. I got sponsored for it. What was a really cool experience, and there's more videos coming of that regard. The next one will be about dynasties. Go check out the Grand Strategy channel of Paradox Interactive, link in the description. The videos will go live there and have been made by yours truly. I'm very excited, incredible experience, very, very fun. This is the last thing before we jump into the dev diary. This of course means that I have played Crusader Kings 3, but if you're hoping for me to spill the beans, I have to disappoint you. I'm not really going to do that. No, because I respect myself and the contractual obligation that I have entered far too much. So essentially, treat me as if I hadn't played the game, but still watched the video where I clearly have played the game. So with that being said, go check it out. It's really cool. I hope that a lot of people get kind of drawn into the roleplay aspects of Crusader Kings, because as you may well know if you've watched this video, if you've followed my opinions on my hot takes on Grand Strategy and Crusader Kings in particular, I view it more as a roleplay game than a Grand Strategy game. Now with that being said, let's jump into performance. Essentially, what Maneth is talking about is that they have optimized CK2 throughout its life cycle. I mean, at the start of it all, of course, there wasn't even India, there was no Tibet there. I believe there was practically no Sub-Saharan Africa, and all of those were added. And of course, when you add much more provinces, many more provinces to the map, then you also have to kind of work on performance. And I will tell you that the performance of CK2 is actually fine. The late game gets really bad. It was a pain to actually do the 3 runs until 1453, even on my machine. In my machine it's a 3600X, so Ryzen, and it was not a good time because it just starts stuttering, it just becomes very slow, there's a lot of bloat going on with the characters, and that is also as far as I can go in explaining why it is that way, because I don't actually know the actual details of it of course. But all of that is something that they have been aware of, and all of that is something that they of course wanted to address in Crusader Kings 3. Now the way this goes is that all of these games that we currently have, all of the Grand Strategy games, are multi-threaded. Don't get that wrong. I see a lot of posts that say, hey Paradox, please multi-thread your games. They already do that. It is explained here in a way where essentially you thread sort of the main thing, everything that happens. So like you have day 1, and then everything that happens, the decisions that characters make, any calculations are done, right? That is day 2, and then you calculate the visuals, so that is then the rendering. And the way it works, it was somewhat optimized, I would argue. They've since moved away from object level parallelism, so for example character decisions and how characters interact with one another, to system level parallelism. So now instead of processing several characters at the same time, we instead process several different systems. For instance, we might update the scheme system at the same time as the opinion system. This allowed us to simplify the rules of what you can do and cannot do massively. Now during parallelism, the only limitation information is that we can't change any visible information. We must instead store the changes we want to do and then apply them a bit later in series. Simplifying the rules means that fewer bugs are introduced, in particular out of sync errors, so OOSs, and it tends to be easier to identify what could have parallelized or what could be parallelized than it was in CK2, resulting in more work being done in parallel than ever before. So huge improvements here in how they do multi-threading. I want to stress that they've always been doing multi-threading, but now they are doing it at a better rate. Then you have this graph here. So I assume these are all threads, like they do things. It's a lot of different colors implies it's good, I'm pretty sure. Chart of time spent on most of the parallel updates. So yeah, I guess this is like one update, takes 304 milliseconds. I can't interpret this. I have no idea what's going on. But what I can tell you is that the game runs very much faster than Crusader Kings II does. And I know that doesn't really make any sense. But you can see it in particular right here. In Crusader Kings II, even if you had a literal NASA computer, if you run it on speed 5, you're guaranteed about 15 frames per second. That is a fact of life. It is as unavoidable as you at some point passing away. Now check this out. This is Maneth on his old machine, so that would be the i7 4770K, a GTX 1080, so this is a very strong one. This is quite the old one, the old CPU. This is quite a very strong one, strong GPU, and this is 16 gigabytes of 2400 megahertz RAM. Check it out, okay? Over here we have one threading, meaning this is effectively, you know, if you didn't have the very efficient multi-threading, and this is full threading. And the difference that we can see right here will become visible once you take a look at this. Now, this is essentially speed 5, and you can see the date here, and you can see the date over here as well. But what is more important, I think, is effectively this. So the green bar, or rather the green string that you see underneath here, is the 60 frames per second border. If the red bar is underneath, that means it had, you know, the game is displaying more than 60 frames per second. If it is above, that means the game is struggling and is chugging along. You're going to see that in a second. Let's just check this out. Right now it's both paused, and in a second it's both. There you go. Yeah. Look at this world of hurt on the right side and then on the left. I mean, first of all, look at the speed on the left, of course. Again, fairly old machine. I think it is interesting to look at. If you have a fairly old machine, then, you know, maybe you can compare these specs that Maneth is using here to what you're seeing. Honestly, like on a machine like that one, it still looks absolutely great in terms of performance. I'm very happy about that, because of course one of the biggest worries that I hear a lot from people is, hey, can I even run that? I have a fairly old computer. And the answer is maybe not. I mean, don't take my judgment here, because I don't understand coding and I barely understand computers. I did build my own computer and stuff, but I'll be honest with you, like, I can't actually tell you how your specs will perform in comparison to Maneth's here. But what I can tell you is this is pretty good. This is a pretty good indication as far as I'm concerned. This is pretty neat, and it also, of course, you know, is pretty neat to see. You can see it right down here, that even with the one threading, you are in 1067 here and you're in 1068 right here. So after about a minute of running, I guess we have to actually scroll a bit further, we are looking at about 3 years passing. What are we looking at here? 958 days. Yeah, a bit less than 3 years, I guess. Well, without it only progressed 546 days. So this is huge. This is a really good performance. And before we move on to different topics, I want to scroll down, because in between doing this test and then writing the dev diary, Maneth got a new computer. That new computer is a Ryzen 9 3900X and 32 gigabytes of incredible 3600 megahertz of RAM. That is incredible. But either way, what we're looking at here is essentially the same test, but on a very new machine. I would call the 3900X a monster. So this is a NASA computer, so to speak. Look at the performance though. You know, of course, at the end of the day, it means that the game runs considerably faster. Even you can see just how fast it runs, like right there. I mean, in just a minute here, give it a moment. Literally now we already are 1 year in, and that is about what, like 12 seconds. But what is, I think, more interesting and more important here is that you can see that the 60 frames are still very stable. You can see right up here how the frame rate is actually doing. I think this is all very impressive. I don't really understand the behind the scenes coding, because I have no idea about coding, but what I can tell you and what I can understand is how it performs, and it performs at an absolutely admirable rate. It absolutely insane to me. You can see if you look at a certain part of the map, he gets 1000 frames if it's paused. I mean, this is obviously a meme screenshot. Good meme, Maneth, good meme, but also these performances are incredible. I think that this is a good basis. If you were afraid, hey, how is this going to perform on my machine? I think this is a good basis to probably no longer be as afraid as you may have been. Overall, these changes have meant that CK3 is better thread utilization than CK2, a more stable frame rate, and that it is harder for programmers to make threading mistakes that lead to bugs, out of sync errors, and crashes. Very, very good news. This performance updates, these upgrades are huge. They're especially huge for mods that are, you know, highly dedicated to the idea of implementing a new and much more sophisticated mechanics world. For example, Elder Kings, let's just, you know, think of magic and all those sort of systems and what they might kind of take out of the game to run them. But also, I think for any sort of DLC content, for map expansion, listen, I'm just going to say it, I still think that we are not going to see China before about 3 or 4 years are over, at least not on the map, but you know, with the performance as it is right now, I am no longer in the will never happen camp. I'm in the camp, I mean, with performance being this good, maybe it can be implemented without anybody losing anything, in which case, you know, you might as well implement it, right, if people are interested in it. So this is really cool performance overview. Thank you for that, Maneth, yet again, and let's move on to the AI. It's time to talk a bit about the AI as well. The AI was mostly worked on by Niklas Captain Garstrid, but Niklas is on parental leave. First of all, congratulations, I hope everybody is doing well, and this is why Maneth also is writing about the AI, even though of course he has worked on it, but not as extensively as Niklas. Since I didn't design the AI, this is going to be briefer than it might have been if Niklas was here to write it, but I'll cover some of the basic ideas behind how I've handled the AI in CK3. Our main goal with the AI has been that it should make the game more fun for the player. This has several aspects to it. It should provide some level of challenge, because steamrolling from the get-go isn't fun. It should avoid doing things that are frustrating, even if it would make it smarter, and it should feel as if it's a plausible actor within a medieval world. So this is, as far as I'm concerned, something that I can sign off entirely. You know my opinion. Again, I very much believe Crusader Kings to be a roleplay game first and map painting sort of expansion game second. Very much second. I think the roleplaying is the essence and the soul of this game. And with that in mind, I do believe that these goals are what I think are the right basis for the AI. Again, it's always a difficult time to compare the goals to the actual result, but ultimately, the way I see it, I don't really care to compete against an AI that does everything to win, and by everything I literally mean I have to min-max to actually get anywhere. That can be thrilling, that can be interesting, and if it's for you, I mean, good for you. I hope you're having fun with the game still. This, I'm not excluding, I'm not attempting to exclude at the very least people that play the game differently, but what I want to say from my perspective is that this is not chess. This is not where I fight an algorithm that might be 100% or 99.999% of the time superior to me. Yeah, because I haven't played chess in years, despite the recent chess craze. But essentially, this is not chess. I play this for the stories and what I can develop. And for example, making the AI not frustrating, especially in warfare issues, is really, really important as far as I'm concerned. Because yes, it might sometimes be optimal to make the player chase you and make it so that you provoke them into prolonging the war eternally until the player runs out of resources. But let's be real, is that fun? Absolutely not. So let's jump into how these sort of tenets of AI coding have been applied. One of the biggest structural changes in CK3's AI is how it deals with its military. In CK2, if there were multiple AIs on the same side in a war, they would essentially act independently from one another with some systems for coordination. This usually worked fine, but sometimes it lead to a lack of coordination between allies and the AI taking odd decisions. I will say that I remember this and have seen it in earlier versions of Crusader Kings II, but especially after Holy Fury, I never actually had that feeling. Quite the opposite, actually. What I see quite a bit is that the AI does exactly what the player does, which is, hey, everybody attached to me and we're now one Doomstake that goes around and beats people up. But that aside, Doomstakes, we're going to get to that in a second here. In CK3, we've designed the system from the ground up to handle multiple AIs on the same side. Instead of each AI commanding their own troops, they assign their troops to a war coordinator that handles all decision making. So the characters, etc. are still of course on their own AI, so to speak, but the military will be handled as though it was by one magical hand above. And I think that's a good choice. I think that is good for war coordination. Still different from the CK2 approach. Let's take a look at why. As such, AIs tend to act in a much more coordinated manner. However, that doesn't address coordination with the player. CK2's approach here in the end was to introduce an AI order system where you'd simply tell the AI what to do. We don't currently have that in CK3, but the AI still has a focus on assisting the player. Generally speaking, the AI will try to keep its armies very close to the player and help out in battles, even if those battles will be lost with its help. An AI order system like in CK2 might still improve this further, but the gap is much smaller than in CK2, so we decided it would not be a priority for release. Additionally, the existence of the order system in CK2 significantly complicated the AI code. Let's not worry about that too much. I'm gonna bring you a hot take, and I'm gonna bring you a hot take that might not be what you think, and that's fine. Please let me know in the comments if you disagree. I'm very much open to that, but I think warfare in Crusader Kings 2 is the worst experience in the entirety of Crusader Kings 2. And this has to do a lot with the fact that AI is simply attached to you. That AI is the moment that you change a command, be it attached to me, siege this down, the moment that you issue these commands, the AI does things. Well, sometimes they're locked into movement already and like are still moving a couple of provinces, but then they will do it. And my problem with that is that effectively every single war in Holy Fury Crusader Kings 2, so 3.2 was, no, it was actually 2.8, right? Holy Fury was 2.8. 2.8 and later, now we are at 3.3.3, every single war boils down to me attaching my AI allies to myself, possibly splitting off a small force so that I can bait the enemy AI into attacking them into the mountains, then I reinforce it. But essentially I was walking around with one massive stack of about 10 nations and my enemy was doing the exact same thing. Now the thing about this is that the system, as I just explained it, is very boring to me because it's just, no matter the size of the war, it's always two armies clashing like this. I can manipulate the AI by faking them. You know, what you do is when they are done sieging a province down entirely, what you do is you start walking into them as though you wanted to go and attack them. This will make the AI walk towards you immediately, and it won't stop walking to you even if you stop walking, meaning they expected you to come to them, but instead you stop walking. They're just like, we can take them, and then they come to you. You can destroy them with the help of reinforcements. The AI was not giving me a fun time. It was very boring. It is a very boring system. The entire warfare system in Crusader Kings 2, the commanders, the modifiers, broken, unbalanced, and most importantly, boring. My opinion. Again, very hot take. But what I want to say is essentially, I wouldn't want to not have AI commands in Crusader Kings 2. They are mandatory there because the AI is too bad at coordinating their armies. But I don't think that the system of telling the AI exactly what it is allowed to do and is supposed to do is a good one. I think that system is bad. It gives you far too much power. There's nobody else involved except you and then that one enemy AI. And apparently virus and threat protection did not find any threats. Thank you, Windows. So I know this is a very hot take, because I understand and I don't necessarily disagree. I could still be there. I'm not against it being there. I know that there's a lot of people that essentially say I would like AI to attach to me and me telling them to attach to me. But I will tell you, if you get instead a system that were to work, if the AI was able to actually coordinate, kind of swarm around you and siege simultaneously as you are also sieging something, but the AI is in a different county, and then when you are in a battle or when a battle is near, the AI will stop sieging and know it has to help you. If you make that work, which isn't easy, just for the record, and if it doesn't work, then that's bad, but if you make that work, infinitely better than a system where you immediately tell the AI exactly what it has to do. I think coordination would still be fine, but what I miss in Crusader Kings as a system, as a game, as warfare, and as far as AI goes, is more that the AI kind of showcases that it has a character. I know that doesn't make it optimal, and that is also why I've long since not been that happy about like the micro heavy warfare, and we're getting lost here a bit, which is why I'm going to cut this tangent short, but I am of course quite well known for speaking very fast and speaking about tangents. Essentially, I'm just very unhappy with Crusader Kings 2 warfare. The AI being supposedly smarty here is a huge boon for me, and if it works, I'm much happier than when it comes to Crusader Kings 3, because Crusader Kings 2 I mean, because Crusader Kings 2 tell the AI what to do, boring. If you don't tell the AI what to do, it's horrible, because the AI is awful at dedicating where it needs to go. So that is my hot take. Let me know in the comments what you think. I'm not want to stress that I'm not necessarily against bringing back AI control, but I don't think the way it was implemented in CK2 was fun. I don't think it was great. I think it was boring and simply cut down on some more flexibility and uncertainty. Now, uncertainty isn't the same as randomness or the AI making bad decisions, but 100% certainty that this is just now one army is complete nonsense as far as I'm concerned. Generally speaking, the AI will try to keep his army very close, right? Blah, we already read all of this. So that cover provides some level of challenge, but what about avoiding frustration? There's a lot of small things here, and they are designed to do that. But let's talk about a couple of concrete examples. In CK3, the AI is a system I tend to call stand and fight. If the player or any other enemy is near its army, I will beat it, and there's no real hope of winning the war as all its troops are already gathered. Then instead of running away, the AI will find a nearby defensive location and wait there for up to a month for the enemy to wipe it out. Now this sounds counterintuitive, because like if you're waiting to be wiped out, is it really that smart? But the reality here is you don't have any other options. You need to take, it's like Helm's Deep, right? You have to take a position as, you know, drawn back as is humanly possible, because otherwise you will definitely fall and you will definitely get, you know, destroyed. Now, if you are hiding in a defensive territory, if you do get attacked because your enemy got a bit cocky, then that was a good tactic. So the way I see this, already considerably better than everything or anything that we had in CK2, where even if the AI was way smaller, if I declare war as the Holy Roman Empire against a count in Normandy, the count will take his 500 people and try to siege down my capital. Is that nonsense? Oh yes, oh big time. Will they still do it? Oh yeah, big time. I think this is way smarter. It's way less annoying because it makes it so that you don't have to hunt them down in your capital, that you don't always have to rush to your capital in order to protect it. I think this is a really, really so much better implementation. The result is that the player doesn't have to chase down armies nearly as much as in CK2, but that it only tends to kick in for wars the player is going to clearly win regardless. Other than that, of course, if you're not that much of a heavyweight and your enemy is a lightweight, then the AI will try to challenge you even in not defensive positive territory. We've talked about the fort mechanics earlier in an earlier dev diary, it's true, but the quick recap is that walking deep into enemy territory without sieging first is going to kill most of your troops, so you're going to take a form of attrition. The AI will thus virtually never do it, so when you're behind your own lines, you have the time to regroup and figure out what to do. I think this is big, because I don't want to see a zone of control as we have it in Europa Universalis 4, for example. I think that is a bad idea. I don't particularly like it. I don't like it in Imperator either. But what I do want to see is, for example, the Alps to be, important. Let's say I am the Lombard League and I'm rebelling against a liege of the Holy Roman Empire. The fact that I have the Alps should protect me to some degree. I should be able to, like, kind of gather behind it and not fear that the Emperor literally just comes down and sieges down my capital in Milan. No, instead, he should be at the border area, because that is exactly what he would be doing, and then he can make his way inland. I think this is the only way, unless you add zones of controls, which I think would be a horrible idea, but I think this is the only way to implement some sort of zone of control that works, because you would be losing so many thousands of men if you were to cross the Alps without sieging anything, without, getting supply, etc, etc. I think this is the right move. There's not really much of a comment there that I have. It also incentivizes, of course, kind of guarding these passes, because those are going to be the main factor, the main area of aggression. I think it is a really, really cool change. I hope it works, but definitely, just don't give me zone of control. Give me this stuff every day of the week. Similarly, there's little temptation to try to chase down the AI deep into its territory, of course, because you would also take attrition. This helps keep the focus more on siege warfare, which is very fitting for the era. Indeed it is. It contributes to every goal I've mentioned. The AI ends up better due to there being fewer options available, so we could make it smarter in picking between those. The player gets less frustrated, and it emphasizes the historical aspect of the era while avoiding silly chases halfway around the world. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I had a hot take when it comes to the AI commanding aspect of it, but in the rest, I think my takes are not that hot. I think this is quite clear why this is better than what we have in Crusader Kings II in any way imaginable. Now, that's been a whole lot of talk about military AI. What about the rest of it? The overall approach there is generally pretty similar to CK2, though rebuilt from scratch. The AI will periodically check a variety of possible actions and take them if they make sense. There's some randomization, and AI personality affects a variety of actions to ensure that the game feels alive rather than deterministic. More of the AI can be modded than in CK2, which is very cool, as the interaction system has far less hard coding. There's still parts of that are hard coded, such as actions that aren't interactions, but overall it should be possible to influence a bit more of the AI than in CK2. Very, very cool. Generally speaking, the goal of the non-military AI is to make the world feel alive. This has occasionally meant needing some restrictions to ensure the player doesn't get overwhelmed. For instance, we've had to, on numerous occasions, restrict seduction against the player so that they don't get absolutely spammed if they happen to play one of the few female rulers around at GameStart. So essentially, they were all focusing on those female rulers if they were to pick the seduction focus. Now, I will say in that regard, it reminds me a lot about the CK2, the infamous Greek characters checking for castration opportunities bug that was in the game at some point, where essentially the game was running incredibly slowly because Greek characters were all the time checking, hey, can I castrate someone? No? Well, what about now? What about now? Really cool stuff. Hope that's not in the game, of course, to that degree, but obviously, you know, there's a lot of optimization to be done with the AI. Now, this is the PC upgrade. We already saw the result. Nice RGB. What does it say? Is that... I can't even read that. Ibo... You know what? I don't know. But look at that. Nice. It's spinning. Nice fan. I think that's the... Isn't that the stock cooler? AMD has great stock coolers, put that aside. This was this dev diary. I'm really, really interested in all of this stuff. I will also tell you again, go subscribe to Grand Strategy. It's actually called Paradox Grand Strategy. Go subscribe to that because there will be videos that I'm in. With that being said, this is the end of this video. Let me know what you think in the comments as always. So something was of course sort of missing, and that is me thanking you, dear members. Thank you for supporting the channel directly, namely the Barons, Stefan the Pelted, Achilles, Nohau, Eterna, Falling Phoenix, Jacob the Musiela, Godan, Florian, MFA, Mitchell, Aaron, Stefan, Snywolf, Trengili, Valerius, Monster Furby, and the newest member, Jake Clear. Jake Clear, thank you for becoming a Baron member. I really appreciate the direct support. Then of course over the counts, Lachlan, Wombat, Shifty, Rex, Romanorum, and Kazen, and last but not least, the absolutely beautiful Dukes, Eric, Kiriana, Goodfield, Nathan, Jack, Kenneth, Lex, so Larry, Soloing, Pixie, and Thomas. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel and what I do. None of this would have been possible without any of you. Thank you so much yet again. Later, alligator.